Shavua Tov, a Freilikin, Hanukkah. How's everybody doing? Great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. Let's light up the darkness. A perfect time for a new wisdom candle on the fourth night of Hanukkah. Our class tonight is sponsored by our very own Franco Zanini, who says, beautiful dedication, Franco says, Mario Rigoni Stern, an Italian author, wrote once, "There was a beautiful sun. Everything was clear and transparent. Only in the hearts of men there was darkness. Sal and Nina, please keep chasing away the darkness from our hearts." Amen. And may God give us the strength to keep chasing the darkness away. And Franco, thank you so much for enabling us to share more Torah with more people around the world. And the merit of that gift, may you and all your loved ones be showered in blessings. And we say Amen. Who's in the house on a Saturday night? We start our week with beautiful Torah learning. Guy in Ohio, Lucy in Minnesota, Joe in the Inland Empire, Bill in Poplar Bluff, Melissa in Great Neck Shandora in the Bronx, Karen in Berkeley, Sharon in New Jersey, Bella in Florida, Spencer in Connecticut, Ella in Southern California, Alan in New York City, Chaim in Florida, Marjorie in Georgia, Ilanit in Silver Spring. We're still in chapter 1, continuing our discussion of Mishna number 1, here in Tractate Sanhedrin, the 24th volume of the Talmud. We're picking this up, actually, pretty close to the top of page 10b. Doing a double allowed us to catch up yesterday, Friday, but we're still near the top of page 10b. Our daf tonight is page 11 here in Sanhedrin. Okay, the Mishnah teaches, this Mishnah generally teaches about the composition of a court, how many judges are required for different kinds of cases. Now we're going to talk about the calendar, right? So the calendar in ancient times, as dictated by the Torah, months began when the Sanhedrin in Jerusalem said they began. It was a lunar-based system, but since a lunar month is not exactly 29 days long, it's either 29 or, it's between 29 and 30 days, but we have to decide, is this day part of this month or that month? So the Sanhedrin would hear testimony from people who had seen the new moon, right? The new moon, no sliver of a moon. That's when the Jewish month begins on the Hebrew calendar. So they would hear the testimony and they would declare when the next month begins, right? So if a month either has 29 or 30 days, so then the new month begins either on the 30th day of the month or on the 31st, meaning that 31st day is not the 31st day of the month, it's the first day of the next month. Okay, but now the calendar has been set in advance, taking into account all kinds of astronomical information that has been available, that wasn't available in ancient times, before they had inventions like a telescope. And so they would decide on a month-to-month basis on whether or not that new moon had been seen and some other factors that they could take into consideration. They will also decide whether or not an extra month gets added to a year. In the Hebrew calendar, a leap year is a month that gets is a year that gets a month added to it. Since the lunar calendar, its months are shorter, they end up having 355 days. And so about a third of the time, they need a whole new month. 7 in 19 years are going to be leap years with an added month. And they add a second month of Adar. Adar is the month with Purim in it. The following month is Nisan, the month with Pesach, with Passover in it. So in some years, they would double Adar, and they presumably decide that at the beginning of the first Adar, because then Purim would be celebrated in the second Adar, the added Adar, so that its proximity to Passover would remain the same. Okay, we're going to get to that in a bit. Right now, we start with this. The Mishnah teaches the intercalation of the month, meaning, are we going to declare that the next month has begun or not? In other words, are we going to declare that the 30th day of the month is the beginning of the new month or another day in the old month? The intercalation of the month is performed by a panel of 3 judges. So the Gemara extrapolates. The Tana of the Mishnah does not teach the calculation. He doesn't use the word calculation. He uses intercalation, right? So the Tana does not teach the calculation to determine if the month must be extended is performed by 3 judges. And he does not teach the sanctification of the new month, right? That the first day, Rosh Chodesh, which is a holiday after all, a kind of sacred day, Rosh Chodesh, we have extra prayers, extra sacrifices on the first day of the month, on Rosh Chodesh, so that would be sanctifying it. But it doesn't say that he teaches that 3 judges are needed to make the sanctification of the new month. It doesn't say that, right? It doesn't say calculation or sanctification is performed by 3 judges. Rather, the Tana of our Mishnah teaches the intercalation of the month, referring to the decision to extend the month by an extra day and begin the following month on the 31st day instead of the 30th. So the Gemara asks, why are judges necessary to extend the month? Simply do not sanctify the new month and let the previous month be intercalated by itself. When the 30th day of any month is not declared the first day of the new month, the earlier month is extended by default. Why then does the Mishnah specify intercalation? Why does it say they're going to sanctify the new month? They're going to determine that, the first day of the new month is going to be a day later. And then the fact that this day that we're saying is going to remain part of the old month would have just happened automatically. Why do we focus on the determination of what that day is, old month or new month, versus saying, when are we sanctifying the first day of the new month? So Abaye said, amend the text of the Mishnah and teach. The sanctification of the new month is performed by 3 judges. Abaye said, that is what we're doing, so we should call it that. And this is also taught in a Baraisa, that the sanctification of the new month and the intercalation of the year is performed by 3 judges, right? When we intercalate the year, we say that this Adar is just going to be the first Adar, and there's going to be another Adar, and that's the one that's going to have Purim in it. So that makes sense when we're talking about the intercalation of a year. But why don't we say that what we're really doing in terms of every month is sanctifying the first day of the new month? Since that's what we're doing, that's what we should say. And Abaye agrees with that. And so this is also taught in Baraisa that the sanctification of the new month and the intercalation of the year is performed by 3 judges. And this is the statement of Rabbi Meir. Rava said in objection to Abaye's explanation, but the Mishnah teaches intercalation. The Mishnah didn't make a mistake. We're not going to change the Mishnah. The Mishnah, the Tana of the Mishnah, the Rabbi of the Mishnah chose this word, intercalation of the month, on purpose, right? It wasn't accidental. So why do we, instead of just changing his language, figure out why he chose that language and what we can learn from it? So Rava said, the Mishnah teaches intercalation, not sanctification. So rather, says Rava, explain the Mishnah like this. If there will be a sanctification of the new month on the 30th day of the month, which is the day that would otherwise be the intercalation. This is done by 3 judges. But after the day of the intercalation, i.e., if the month is sanctified on the 31st day, then there is no active sanctification necessary. Once they say that the 30th day is going to remain part of the old month, then we know that the next month is sanctified. The judges aren't sanctifying it. They only sanctify the first day of the month when they declare that the 30th day of the old month will not be the 30th day of the old month. It will be the first day of the new month. That's when they're sanctifying it. But if they say, no, it's going to remain part of the old month, they didn't sanctify the new month. They just said that the 30th day remains in the old month. That's why the word intercalation of the month is more accurate, per the explanation of Rav. And in accordance with whose opinion is this? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok, as it is taught in a Mishna, Tractate Rosh Hashanah, page 24a. Rabbi Elazar ben Tzadok says, if the new moon was not seen at its anticipated time, the court does not formally sanctify the new moon on the following day, as the celestial court in heaven has already sanctified it, precluding the need for the additional sanctification by the earthly court. It's that when they, hear testimony and say on the 30th day, yeah, no, this is not the new month. This is still the old month. They don't, meet again the next day and say, this is the first day of the new month, right? That's already been determined when they decided that the 30th day belonged to the old month. So they're not sanctifying the new month. They are just deciding whether the 30th day belongs to the old month or not. Now, taking the opposite opinion, Rav Nachman says, in the instance of sanctification of the new moon after the intercalation of the month through the addition of the 30th day to the previous month, the sanctification is performed by 3 judges. But if the new moon is declared on the day of the intercalation so that the previous month is left with only 29 days, there is no active sanctification. This is the standard time for the new moon, and no intervention is necessary. And in accordance with whose opinion is this? It is in accordance with the opinion of Palemu, as it is taught in a Baraisa that Palemu says, if the new moon was reported at its anticipated time, the court does not sanctify the new moon. Right? We expect that the 29th day, we expect that the 30th day will be, that the 29th day was the last day, and that the new month begins on the 30th day. We expect that. Sometimes, right, we're going to say the month is full and we're going to delay the Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of the new month, till one day later, till the 31st day. So according to this view, when they say, no, the new month begins on the 30th day, that's expected, so they're just letting it happen. When they say, no, this day belongs to the old month, then they're causing the next day, tomorrow, when they're not meeting, to be sanctified as the new day. So that's when the court is actually stepping in and sanctifying a different day than would have otherwise been sanctified by the natural occurrence of the moon in the sky. Now this all happens because, right, the months they kind of add a little bit more. They're like 29 and a half days, 29 and a fraction. So this month it's not quite enough. So we leave the month as a 29-day month. And then the next month, no, it's a little bit more, but we could still leave it as a 29-day month. And then the fraction just adds up a little bit more. Then let's say in the 3rd month, now we have to say, no, this is definitely going to be a 30-day month, and Rosh Chodesh is delayed till the 31st day. But that's the job of the Sanhedrin when the calendar was not determined, far in advance using astronomical tools. Now, Rav Ashi said, actually, the Mishnah teaches that 3 judges are necessary for the calculation to determine when the new moon should be declared. And what is the term intercalation that is mentioned in the Mishnah? It is the calculation of the intercalation. And although the wording of the Mishnah is not precise, it is written this way for a reason. Since the Mishnah needed to teach the number of judges necessary for the intercalation of the year, when we add a month of Adar, the Mishnah also taught using parallel language the intercalation of the month, so as to describe the similar processes of adding to the year and adding to the month with the same verb. It's kind of a little bit accident of grammar. Now the Gemara notes, with regard to the calculation of the month, yes, this requires 3 judges. But with regard to the sanctification of the month, this does not require 3 judges. In accordance with whose opinion is this? It is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. As it is taught in a Baraisa that Rabbi Eliezer says, whether it was reported in its anticipated time or whether it was not reported in its anticipated time, right? That meaning that the month would begin on the 30th day or not. We do not sanctify the new moon formally, as it is stated, and you shall sanctify the 50th year. That's the Yovel, right? The Jubilee year. When does it become the Jubilee year? When does it formally become the Jubilee year? Right? When the Sanhedrin sanctifies and announces this coming year is the 50th year. Now, it would have been the 50th year anyway, but they announce it and say, we are entering the Jubilee year. So the court makes that announcement, and that's because we're told to do that in the Torah. Leviticus 25:10. And you shall sanctify the 50th year. You must formally sanctify years, but you do not formally sanctify months, as they are sanctified automatically. In any case, calculation, when necessary, is performed by 3 judges. Okay, so we were arguing about the language, but the process is done by 3 judges. Everyone agrees that. And they just would determine when this was done in Jerusalem, whether, the new month is going to begin on the 30th or the 31st day. Okay, new subject. The Mishna, our Mishnah, Mishnah number 1 here in chapter 1, teaches, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, minority opinion, that intercalation is performed in stages. Now this is not about intercalation of the month or sanctification of the month, whatever you want to call it. This now is about intercalation of the year. Whether or not they're going to add a second month of Adar in the spring, because if you don't do that, and you have a Hebrew year that is 355 days, and we know the solar year is 365 days, right? And so if you don't add a month from time to time, then what's going to end up happening is that we start shifting further and further away from the solar seasons. And then you could end up having a holiday like Passover, which needs to be celebrated in the springtime. It could end up shifting back to the winter, shifting further back to the fall. And that's no good. We want to keep holidays at approximately the same time. That's why right now, right, we're having a late Hanukkah. Hanukkah is going to overlap with the solar new year. That's very late. Other times, right, we've had, a few years ago, we had Hanukkah overlapping with Thanksgiving back in November. So you see that the Hebrew year shifts around. But Hanukkah is never going to end up being in February, and it's never going to end up being in October, because there are limits to how much it can shift, and that's because of intercalation of the year by adding this second month of Adar. Okay, so when this was not predetermined in advance, but it was declared by judges of the Sanhedrin appointed for this purpose, how many judges were used for this? Now this is interesting what Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says. He describes a process. He says, the deliberations begin with 3 judges. They debate the matter with 5 judges, and they conclude the matter with 7 judges. Right? They raise the issue, they begin with 3 judges, then they flesh out the debate with 5, and then they conclude the matter with 7. And now the Gemara explains. So it is taught in a Baraisa. How does Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel say the intercalation is to be conducted? The court begins the deliberation with 3 judges. And they debate the matter with 5, and they conclude with 7. At first, 3 judges convene for a preliminary discussion with regard to the necessity of adding a month to the year. If one of them says it is necessary to sit and deliberate the question of intercalation, and 2 of them say that there is not a need to sit and continue, the single opinion is negated in its minority, and the process ends. If 2 say, we should sit, and 1 says we don't sit, so then the majority decision causes the process to move forward to the next stage, and then the court adds another 2 judges. And so now there are 5 judges who debate the matter. If 2 of them say the year needs the extra month, but 3 of them say it does not need it, well then the 2 are negated in their minority. But if three say the year needs, three or more say that the year needs intercalation, then even if two say it does not need it, the court proceeds to the next stage and adds another two judges, as the quorum for declaring an intercalation may not be fewer than 7 judges. Now the Gemara asks, corresponding to what was it determined that the intercalation procedure should incorporate these numbers of 3, 5, and 7 judges? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani and one other sage who was with him disagree about this. And who is that scholar? Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi. And some say that this was a matter of dispute between Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi and one other scholar who was with him. And who is that other scholar? Rabbi Yitzchak bar Nachmani. And one said these numbers correspond. Okay, so where do they get 3, 5, 7 as the number of judges to open the debate about the intercalation, to do the debate, and to conclude the debate? 3, 5, 7. Where do they get these numbers? Okay, so one of these sages said they get these numbers because they correspond to the number of Hebrew words in each of the 3 verses of the priestly benediction. Yivarecha Hashem v'yishmerecha, Ya'er panav elecha v'yihuneka, Yisa Hashem. I'm using it with God's name. I'm trying not to use God's name like when I bless my children. The point is, in English, you would say, may God bless you and keep you. May God countenance you and be gracious to you. May God favor you and grant you peace. That's the priestly benediction. When you do it in Hebrew, the first line has 3 words, the second has 5, and the third line has 7 words. So that's one answer where they get the 3, 5, 7. But the other one, the other sage says, the 3 corresponds to the 3 guards of the door to the king's chamber. We see that in 2 Kings 25:18. 5 corresponds to the 5 officers who saw the king's face, and 7 corresponds to the 7 officers who saw the king's face in Jeremiah 52:25. Since these numbers represent appointments of distinction, the rabbis saw fit to employ them in the composition of the court as well. And similarly, Rav Yosef taught a baraisa. These numbers, 3, 5, 7, are adopted from different numbers of the king's servants. 3 corresponds to the guards of the door. 5 corresponds to of those officers who saw the king's face mentioned in 2 Kings. And 7 corresponds to the officers who saw the king's face mentioned in the book of Jeremiah. So in other words, it's not like they were all serving all the time, but the Bible mentions that there were 3 outside the door, 5 who saw the king's face, presumably were in the quarters with him, guarding him. And in a different source in Jeremiah, it says that the ones who were inside seeing the king's face were 7. At any rate, this idea of these were the people who were, honored to be close personal guards of the king. And that the idea being that judges who are involved in setting the calendar for the Jewish people are in this very close partnership with Hashem. Similarly, Rav Yosef taught a baraisa. These numbers, 3, 5, and 7. Did I just say that? Yeah, I just said that. When Rav Yosef taught this, Abaye said to Rav Yosef, "What is the reason that until now the master did not explain the matter to us this way, although you have taught this material before?" And Rav Yosef said to Abaye and the others with him, "I did not know that you needed this information, as I thought you were already familiar with the baraisa. Have you ever asked me something that I did not tell you?" New subject. The Gemara presents a mnemonic device for several other sources cited with regard to the intercalation of the year. This is the memory device, Zaman, Nasi, Tzarik, Gedi. And the sages taught in a baraisa. The year may be intercalated only, and now we're on page 11a, by those who were invited by the Nasi, right, the head of the Sanhedrin. Those who were invited by the Nasi for that purpose. And there was an incident involving Rabban Gamliel, who was the Nasi, who said to the sages, "Bring me 7 of the sages early tomorrow morning to the loft designated for the convening of a court to intercalate the year." So he went to the loft early the next morning, and he found 8 sages there. Rabban Gamliel said, "Who is it who ascended to the loft without permission? He must descend immediately." I invited 7. There's 8 here. Somebody came uninvited. Please leave. Shmuel HaKatan, right? So Shmuel, his name is Shmuel. In English, that's Samuel. HaKatan means the small. So Sam the small. Shmuel the small one. Now, some say this is because he was exceedingly humble, that he was called Shmuel the small. And some say it's because he was only slightly less prominent than Shmuel the prophet. Okay? So Shmuel HaKatan stood up and said, I am he who ascended without permission, and I did not ascend to participate and be one of those to intercalate the year, but rather I needed to observe in order to learn the practical halacha, to learn the law. Rabban Gamliel said to him, sit, my son, sit. It would be fitting for all of the years to be intercalated by you, as you are truly worthy. But the sages said, the year may be intercalated only by those who were invited for that purpose. He wasn't invited for that purpose, so he can't sit there. But now the Gemara adds a little detail to the story that's like, oh. And it was not actually Shmuel HaKatan who had come uninvited, but another person. And due to the embarrassment of the other person, Shmuel HaKatan did this, so that no one would know who had come uninvited. So that other person wouldn't be humiliated. Shmuel stood up and said, oh yeah, I barged in. I'm sorry, I just wanted to learn about the law. But he was just doing that to save this other sage from embarrassment who shouldn't have been there. The Gemara relates that the story about Shmuel HaKatan is similar to an incident that occurred when Rebbe was sitting and teaching, and he smelled the odor of garlic. Rebbe was very sensitive and could not tolerate this odor. And he said whoever ate garlic should leave. Rabbi Chia stood up and left. Out of respect for Rabbi Chia, all of the people in attendance stood up and left. The next day in the morning, Rabbi Shimon, the son of Rebbe, found Rabbi Chia and said to him, are you the one who disturbed my father by coming to the lecture with the foul smell of garlic? And Rabbi Chia said to him, there should not be such behavior among the Jewish people. I would not do such a thing, but I assumed the blame and left so that the one who did so would not be embarrassed. Now, what ended up happening? Everyone knew it wasn't Rabbi Chia who would, smell up the place, because they all knew their teacher, Rebbe, that he couldn't tolerate this kind of a thing. But somebody maybe was a newcomer and didn't know that. Rabbi Chia didn't want to embarrass him, so Rabbi Chia stood up and said, it's on me. But when he left, everyone said, we got to preserve the honor of Rabbi Chia. So they all left. And then Rebbe was left with no pupils to teach, right? So you could see why it was a real problem for Rebbe. But Rabbi Chia, he was trying to save somebody else some embarrassment. And from where did Rabbi Chia learn that characteristic of being willing to implicate himself in order to save someone else from being embarrassed? He learned it from Rabbi Meir. As it is taught in Baraisa, there was an incident involving a certain woman who came to the study hall of Rabbi Meir. And she said to him, my teacher, one of you, meaning one of the men studying in this study hall, betrothed me through intercourse. The woman came to Rabbi Meir to appeal for help in identifying the man, so that he would either marry her or grant her a divorce. As he himself was also among those who studied in the study hall, Rabbi Meir arose and wrote her a gett, a bill of divorce, and he gave it to her. Following his example, every man in the study hall arose and wrote a gett and gave it to her. In this manner, the right man also gave her a gett, freeing her to marry someone else without having to be revealed, as somebody who had slept with a woman, which, now it doesn't happen. It doesn't create the same consequence, right? Back then, when it was exceedingly rare for anyone to have premarital sex, if someone did have sex, that was one of the ways of getting betrothed. And so if they wanted to undo it, so if people had sex, right, then they were considered betrothed. And if they didn't want to get married, then that guy had to give her a gett. This whole thing is highly embarrassing to Torah scholars who should not have any kind of, dealings with such behavior. And so Rabbi Meir, to save one of his students from being revealed in this way, did what he did. Everybody gave her a gett. And in that way, she was divorced. She's free to marry someone else. And, and this guy was not exposed. You could argue maybe he should have been exposed. But that's how it happened. And from where did Rabbi Meir learn that characteristic? From Shmuel HaKatan, in the incident outlined above. Wait, didn't we just go in a circle? And from where did Shmuel HaKatan learn it? From Shekaniah ben Yehiel. As it is written, this is Ezra 10:2. And Shekaniah, the son of Yehiel, one of the sons of Elam, answered and said to Ezra, we have broken faith with our God and have married foreign women of the peoples of the land, yet now there is hope for Israel concerning this. And although he confessed, Shekaniah is not listed among those who took foreign wives. Evidently, he confessed only to spare the others from public embarrassment. And this is that, this is when the 70-year Babylonian exile came to an end, right? Remember that Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed the first temple and then taken most of the Jewish people out of Israel and scattered them through the Babylonian Empire. The story of Purim, the book of Esther, takes place during that period. And then eventually, Nebuchadnezzar was defeated. The Persians took over from the Babylonians. I think it's pretty well accepted that Esther's son, Esther, who married Ahasuerus, her son became the emperor. And he authorized the Jews to go back to Israel and rebuild the temple. That's how the second temple came about. So when the Jews went back to Israel, the level of the nation, spiritual level, had really descended while it was in Persia. Yes, there was a wonderful, observant, and learned community that became, the sages of Talmud Bavli that we're learning today. But there were also, of course, many Jews who assimilated into the Persian Empire. And then there were Jews who had married, non-Jewish women, which they're not supposed to do. And newsflash, Jews need to marry other Jews. People who, don't want to say that because it's politically incorrect. Yeah, nonsense. Jews need to marry other Jews, because if Jews don't marry other Jews, eventually there's no Jewish people. So, but you could see this is an old problem. So there were a bunch of Jews who married Persian women, and now they're going to go back to Israel and build a temple. And the Jews who did that were told by Ezra and Nehemiah, yeah, you can't go with your non-Jewish wives to go back and reclaim Israel and build the second temple. And they left their wives and went back, which is an incident we'll study on a different day. But what's going on here is that this Shekaniah says, yeah, well, we married these women, but, we can put them aside and go back to Israel. He wasn't one of them who had married a non-Jewish woman, but he spoke on behalf of his community as if he was one of them to save others from embarrassment. Now, the Gemara continues, and from where did Shekaniah ben Yehiel learn it? This kind of behavior. From an incident involving Joshua, right? Moses is second in command. As it is written, and the Lord said to Joshua, after Joshua became the leader of the Jewish people after Moses' death, right? And the Lord said to Joshua, get yourself up. Why do you fall upon your face? Israel has sinned. That's Joshua 7, verses 10 and 11. And Joshua said before him, Master of the universe, who sinned? And God said to him, am I your informer? Rather, cast lots to determine who is guilty. So in this way, God did not directly disclose the identity of the sinner to Joshua. God himself did not act as an informer. And if you wish, say instead that Shekaniah ben Yehiel learned this from an incident involving Moses himself. As it is written, Exodus 16:28. And the Lord said to Moses, how long do you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws? Although only a small number of people attempted to collect the manna on Shabbos, God spoke as though the entire nation were guilty, so as not to expose the guilty parties. Now, new subject, let's get back to Shmuel HaKatan. Since Shmuel HaKatan and his great piety were mentioned, the Gemara now relates several incidents that shed additional light on his personality. The sages taught, after the last of the prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, died, the divine spirit of prophetic revelation departed from the Jewish people. Right? That's early in the Second Temple period, was the end of prophecy. But nevertheless, they were still utilizing a bas kol, right? Bas kol literally means daughter of a voice. Usually it's translated as a divine voice, and it implies some kind of heavenly communication that people hear, but it's not, doesn't rise to the level of actual prophecy. So what does this mean? But nevertheless, they were still utilizing a bas kol, which they heard as a kind of echo of prophecy. So one time, a group of sages were reclining in the loft of the house of Guriah in Jericho, and the bas kol was bestowed upon them from heaven, saying, "There is one here who is fit for the Shekhinah, for the divine presence to rest upon him, as it rested upon Moses, our teacher. But his generation is not deserving of this distinction." Right? So somebody was at the level of Moses, or at least deserving to have the divine presence rest on him and to make him a prophet. But the nation's spiritual level had sunk so low that the nation did not deserve to have a prophet among them. So even though there was an individual worthy of that distinction, the nation was not worthy. And we're being told that by the bas kol. And the sages said, well, who is this individual? Who is that worthy? And they set their eyes upon Hillel the elder, trusting that he was the one indicating by the bas kol. And when Hillel died, the sages said about him, "Alas, the pious man, alas, the humble man, a disciple of Ezra." Right? Now, Hillel was quite a bit later than Ezra, but he was, linked to him, back to the age of the prophets. And the Baraisa continues, another time a group of sages were reclining in the loft in Yavne, and a divine voice was bestowed upon them from heaven, saying, "There is one here who is fit for the Shekhinah to rest upon him in prophecy, but his generation is not deserving of this distinction." And the sages set their eyes upon Shmuel HaKatan. And when he died, the sages said about him, "Alas, the pious man, alas, the humble man, a disciple of Hillel." And additionally, he said at the time of his death, under the influence of the divine spirit, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, the Nasi of the great Sanhedrin, and Rabbi Yishmael, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, will die by the sword, and their friends will die by other executions, and the rest of the nation will be despoiled, and great troubles will ultimately come upon the world. In other words, he predicted the future accurately. And they also wish to say thus, "Alas, the pious man, alas, the humble man," about Yehuda ben Bava in their eulogy for him. But the hour was torn, i.e., this means that the opportunity was lost, as one does not eulogize those who are executed by the government. As will be explained in page 14a, Yehuda ben Bava was executed by the government, right, by the Romans. And you can't eulogize the people that the Romans execute lest they execute you. The Gemara returns to the discussion about intercalation of the year. The sages taught the year may be intercalated only if the Nasi of the Sanhedrin wants to intercalate it. And there was an incident involving Rabban Gamliel, who was the Nasi, who went to ask permission for some communal matter from an officer in Syria, meaning the government, right, the Romans who were oppressing them. And he tarried in returning until after it was too late to intercalate the year. And because they did not know what his opinion on the matter was, they intercalated the year conditionally. right? On the condition that Rabban Gamliel would want it. And when Rabban Gamliel came back and said, yes, I want to intercalate the year was found to be retroactively intercalated. So they obeyed the halacha that we can only intercalate if the Nasi wants it. He wasn't around, but they figured he probably would want it, such that they did the conditional intercalation. The sages taught the year may be intercalated only if it is necessary due to damage to the roads. So here, right, we're talking about when do we add that second month of Adar, right? So like if, we've sort of shifted away from, like we've moved Passover a little bit early into the spring, right? But not terribly early. So it could go either way, right? This year we could leave it where it is, or we could add a second month of Adar and shift Passover later. So it's kind of borderline. So then we can take, certain kinds of communal matters, elements that affect the population of the nation into account. The sages can take this into account when they're deciding whether to add that month or not. And what kinds of factors can they take into account? So the year may be intercalated only if it is necessary due to damage to the roads. If the rain has damaged them in such a way that they are inaccessible for those ascending to Jerusalem for Passover, or due to the bridges that are likewise in disrepair, or due to the ovens in which the paschal offering will be baked, right? Like the Pesach means the goat or lamb, its blood would be sprinkled on the altar, and then people would eat it in Jerusalem in observance of the Passover. But if there wasn't going to be enough ovens around for people to do that, that might be a reason to add a second Adar, so there would be time to get the ovens ready for Passover. Or due to the diaspora Jews, the Jews coming to Jerusalem from outside of Israel, and who have left their homes and still have not arrived due to delays in travel. So those are factors you can't take into account. But the year may not be intercalated due to the snow, and not due to the cold, and not due to the diaspora Jews who have not yet left from their homes, even if they no longer have enough time to reach Jerusalem for the festival. Those reasons are not considered significant enough to add a second Adar to the year. Now the sages taught the year may not be intercalated due to the young goats and not due to the lambs, to allow them to grow larger before they are to be sacrificed as paschal offerings, and not due to the fledgling doves who have not yet developed sufficiently to fly, so that there won't be enough of them to supply all those who wish to bring bird offerings at the festival. But all these considerations may be made supporting factors in the decision to intercalate the year. And the Gemara asks, how so? And Rabbi Yanai says in the name of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, i.e. this is the language of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel used in his declaration of the intercalation, we are notifying you that the fledglings are tender and that the lambs are thin, and time for the spring has not yet arrived. And consequently, the matter is good in my eyes, and I have therefore added 30 days onto this year. Now, the Gemara raises an objection to the report that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel holds the intercalated month is 30 days long. Right? When we're going to add a month, a second Adar, is it going to be 30 days long, or is it going to be 29 days long? The standard length is 29, right? Full months are 30. Why are we adding a 30-day month? It is taught in a Baraisa, how long is the additional month in an intercalated leap year? The rabbis say 30 days. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says a standard month. That's 29 days. So what then does Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel hold? So Rav Papa said Rabban Gamliel holds that if the court wants, it may add a standard month, and if it wants, it may add a month of 30 days, whatever's going to work out better for the calendar in that year. Concerning the declaration of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, the Gemara observes, come and see what difference there is between the earlier stern authorities and the later humble authorities. For although Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel was known as particularly humble, his proclamation was written with less modesty than that of his father, Rabban Gamliel, who was known to be particularly stern. Now on page 11b. As it is taught in a Baraisa, there was an incident involving Rabban Gamliel, who was sitting on a step on the Temple Mount, and Yochanan, that scribe, was standing before him, and 3 blank documents cut from parchment and ready for writing were set before him. Now here's a little peek, into how sort of, Jewish administration of the calendar and sort of governance was, they were still subject to Roman law, but just listen how Rabban Gamliel is going to communicate with other Jewish communities outside of Jerusalem. Rabban Gamliel said to the scribe, "Take one document and write, 'To our brothers, the people of the upper Galilee, and to our brothers, the people of the lower Galilee, may your peace increase. We are informing you that the time has come for eradication of tithes, now that had been separated from produce but not yet given to their designated recipients, as is to be done in the 4th and 7th years of the Shemitah cycle." Right? In the 3rd and 6th years, the second tithe, Meiser Sheni, instead of being used for pilgrims to eat, to have what to eat and drink when they go up to Jerusalem for the festivals, instead of using it for that purpose, it's given to the poor, to the orphans and widows and otherwise poor people in the 3rd and 6th year. That, the deadline for getting that done is in the 4th and 7th year, right? Like you had all year to do that. Now we've reached the date where it's the deadline. If you have any tithes that you haven't given away to poor people, give it to them now. That's the eradication of the tithes. And the time has also come to separate the tithe from the vat of olives. Most of the local olives were grown in the Galilee. Again, another deadline had been reached. Rabban Gamliel continued instructing the scribe, that was the first document, and take one document, now the second document, and write, "To our brothers, the people of the south," meaning the area of Judea and its environs, "may your peace increase. We are informing you that the time has come for eradication, to separate tithe from the mounds of stalks of grains," right? Olives, and he talks about Galilee. Grain was grown in the Judea area. And it talks to the scribe, and now he says, the third document, "And take one document and write, 'To our brothers, the people of the diaspora in Babylonia, and to our brothers who are in Medea, and to our brothers of the entire Jewish diaspora, may your peace increase forever. We are informing you that the fledglings are tender and the lambs are thin, and time for the spring has not come, and consequently the matter is good before me and before my colleagues, i.e. in our estimation, and I have consequently added 30 days to this year. I've added a second Adar." So the third letter to the diaspora indicates that evidently Rabban Gamliel included others in his decision whether to add a month or not. It wasn't a unilateral decision of the Nasi. But the Gemara rejects this and explains perhaps this incident occurred after they deposed Rabban Gamliel from his position as Nasi. When he was reinstated, he shared his office with Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Therefore, he wrote the decision in the name of his colleagues as well. Now, didn't we just learn before that the judges decide that they're going to intercalate the year? Start with 3 judges, add another 2, and then, make a decision with 7 judges. So what are they saying? It seems like they're not even going to begin that process unless the Nasi says begin the process. Then they go through the process, and then, when the Nasi gets his basically approval from those 7 judges, he sends out the letters. That's what it seems like. That's how it seems to me that it works. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The sages taught in a Baraisa, the court may intercalate the year for 3 matters. For the ripening of the grain, if it is not yet time for the barley to ripen, for the fruit of the trees, if they have not yet ripened, and for the equinox, i.e. to ensure that the autumnal equinox will precede Sukkot. In other words, to keep in sync with the solar year. If 2 of these concerns apply, the court intercalates the year, even if the third factor does not apply. But for only one of them, the court does not intercalate the year, right? The Nasi has to want to do it. Then it goes to this court, and these are the factors that court will consider. And the Baraisa continues, and when the ripening of the grain is one of the concerns, everyone is happy. Since the grain is not yet ripe, the people do not mind waiting an extra month for Nisan, for the spring month that includes Passover. If the grain is already ripe, however, the extra month would simply prolong the period during which the grain may not be eaten due to the prohibition of the new crop, as the new crop may be harvested and eaten only after the sacrifice of the Omer offering on the 16th day of Nisan. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says, for the equinox, and the Gemara seeks to clarify this statement. A dilemma was raised before the sages when he said, for the equinox, or equinox, right? When is there an equinox? In the spring and in the fall. What's an equinox? When the day and the night are equal length, right? 12 hours each. In the winter, you have the night is longer than the day. In the summer, you have that the day is longer than the night. So on the first day of spring and on the first day of fall is the equinox, right? So that's one way to conveniently measure where we are in the solar year. So where am I? So dilemma was raised before the sages. When he said for the equinox, did he mean this is the reason for that everyone is happy? Or did he mean that only for the equinox may the court intercalate the year? Teku, that dilemma shall stand unresolved. And the sages taught in a Baraisa, the court may intercalate the year for 3 regional lands of the land of Israel, meaning that the court considers the agricultural situation in 3 regions: Judea and Transjordan and the Galilee. Right? So Judea is the area immediately to the north of Jerusalem, going from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean. The Galilee is north of that, right, in the area of the Sea of Galilee. And Transjordan is on the east of the Jordan River, where, currently you would find the country of Jordan. So what does it say here? Right, so you would consider only these 3 regions when determining whether or not to intercalate the year and add a second Adar. So if there is a concern about 2 of these regions, the court intercalates the year. In other words, if 2 of these regions will benefit from the intercalation, they intercalate the year. But if there is a concern about only 1 of these regions, the court does not intercalate the year. And when Judea is one of the 2 regions, everyone is happy because the Omer offering comes only from Judea. If the court therefore ensures that the crops in Judea ripen just before the Omer is brought, the crops will certainly be ripe in other regions as well, and there will be no complications with the prohibition of the new crop. That's where we'll knock off. I'll take a few questions. Sharon, are the judges added to the existing panel of judges, 3 plus 2, 5 plus 2, or are entirely new panels appointed each time? No, judges are added. We start with 3 and then we add 2. So the 3 remain and it becomes 5. And then we add 2 more and the 5 remain and it becomes 7. Sharon, I find it interesting that we are concerned about not humiliating Torah scholars, but there was no mention about humiliating the woman accused of adultery a couple of tractates ago. Was it not considered embarrassing to them? Great question. Great question. I don't know, because if we're saying that we don't know if she's guilty or not, like we're not concerned about embarrassing criminals, but we don't know if she's guilty of that or not, so we should be very concerned about not embarrassing her. Lucy, so it seems that for the sages, being humble meant not to make yourself look better than others and not letting others look worse than you. It keeps the community united. Is there a way to expose some wrongdoing while staying humble? Not always easy, and something that we absolutely need to aspire to based on these examples. I think that's really well put, Lucy. That's what I've got for us tonight. And with God's help, see you tomorrow, Sunday, at the regular Sunday time, 6 p.m. Pacific. Have a great night. And good Vach. And Hanukkah Sameach.